Welcome to our session on how to recruit new supporters cheaply and effectively. And I'm delighted to introduce Mark Barkaway, who's the Head of Marketing and Income Generation at Albion in the Community, which is the charity arm of Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club. ChangeStar have worked with Mark on a number of fundraising projects over the years, from his time at Sussex Wildlife Trust and most recently helping AITC to build their individual giving programme, their regular giving scheme and their recruitment plans. So Mark, welcome. And I guess before we sort of start off, it'd be good just to kind of define what is Albion in the Community?
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and hello to everyone who's on the call today. It's great to be here and be part of this conversation. Yeah, a great place to start. What is Albion in the Community? As you say, Richard, we are the official charity of Brighton and Hove Albion. They are a Premier League football club based down here on the south coast. So we're a sporting charity, and we use sport for development. And as Richard said, I think there are a number of football charities on the call today. But for those of you who aren't a football charity, you might be kind of thinking, what does that mean? What does a football charity? Why does a football charity exist? Well, the majority of football clubs, at whatever level they play, whether they're professional, semi-professional, or maybe at an amateur level, have some form of charitable arm, a charitable foundation, or community programs that would be associated with it. And the reason, I think, is that football clubs are examples of what we can call anchor organisations in our communities. And anchor organisations are those institutions that might be based in a place for a really long time, and they're unlikely to ever move location. And usually their purpose and their mission is intrinsically bound up with that area and that sense of geography. So other examples of anchor organisations would be your university, your hospital, your cathedral, your museum, and football clubs are the same as that. They form part of that very fabric and heritage of a sense of place. So football clubs are positioned in a really interesting space to be able to help their communities, and to do so through community programs and associated charities. So Albion in the Community, we're the charity of Brighton and Hove Albion. We're an independent charity, and specifically what we do is we provide activities in our community that use the power of football to help people to get active, to learn new skills, and to improve their well-being. So we're a multi-issue charity that's sports focused. We're encouraging and promoting participation in football as a game for everyone, because we want people to get physically active and improve their health. And we use football as a tool to do that. So we're promoting female participation. We deliver a large program of football for people with a disability, so that there's no barriers to playing the game. And then we also have an educational outreach program where we're going into local schools, and we use the profile of the football club and interest in football as a way to teach literacy, numeracy, enterprise skills, and interesting subjects like STEM. So we do a lot. We work with around 45,000 people every year. We're focused on the geographical area of Sussex. So we're a local charity. We employ about 100 core staff. So we're a reasonably large local charity. But as I said, we're legally an independent charity. We're financially independent from the football club, and we have to raise funds for the delivery of our activities through a planned fundraising program.
And so why did Albion in the Community see potential, particularly in individual giving, as a fundraising channel?
Yeah, well, I joined Albion Community from another local charity where I was the director of fundraising, and that charity had a very successful individual giving program, and it had been nurtured for a really long time, sort of decades, 10, 20 years, and they'd been able to get to a level of having over 30,000 people making regular monthly direct debit gifts, hundreds of thousands of pounds being raised through cash appeals, significant funds coming in from in-memory gifts and major donors, and millions of pounds of legacies every single year, because of a individual giving program that was there. So I guess I had seen an end result really of a really long-term approach of building a community of charity supporters, and that charity that I was previously in is actually of a comparable size to Albion Community, and comparable geographical scope, but had a very different fundraising mix in place. So when I joined Albion Community, we had no defined individual giving fundraising program. The fundraising has been focused on restricted grants and fundraising events program. which is adequate, but long time that's really hard work because you're constantly running really fast to stand still. And they're the kind of fundraising that actually it gives you immediate cash flow and a really good engagement point with donors. But actually sometimes the return on investment can be a little bit questionable. And when you have things like a pandemic come along and you can't run events, actually your income potentially falls off a bit of a cliff edge. So we had no long-term sustainable planned income coming in that we could absolutely rely on. And our fundraising activity was very much transactional rather than relational. So what we wanted to do was actually build a program that really helped to bring people closer to us. And I think also some of my assumption has been that actually individual giving and regular giving fits really well with the ethos of supporting a football team, because actually there are core ideas around pride, loyalty, commitment that are important if you're a fan of a football club, but also they're really important principles for supporting a charity, supporting a cause that you really believe in. And probably most importantly for us, actually, the big opportunity was that we don't actually have to work very hard to identify who our charity supporters are. They're fans of the football club, and if you're not a fan of the football club, you're unlikely to support us as a charity. And we know where they are. You know, if we have 30,000 and they turn up at the stadium on a match day, so they come to us. We don't have to work very hard to identify them, and we also know that football fans are loyal. You know, they're not going to change allegiances, and really the challenge is just how do you convert the passion that a football fan has for their football club into the same level of passion for the charity that's associated to the football club.
So there's this huge base of latent potential support there, which you're very lucky in having. I mean, yeah. Some charities have this, as we'll see a bit later on. But yeah, it's an amazing opportunity, and it was an amazing opportunity. I mean, I guess before we get onto the recruitment side, one final question on this was, you know, I think even though you had this amazing opportunity, I think whenever any charity is embarking on individual giving, they still have to make, you still have, as the fundraiser, you still have to make the argument to the board about investment and about why the program is worth doing. Can you sort of briefly tell us how you did that, and whether that's sort of still going on, or whether it was just right, yeah, here's some money, off you go?
Yeah, it's this fundamental challenge, isn't it, for fundraisers, about how do you get your board understanding what fundraising is and isn't, and the potential that they can have. I think at Albion community, we're really lucky to have a really supportive board. I'm part of the senior management team, which obviously helps that fundraising has been invested in at that level. But we'd never actually had a long-term fundraising strategy before I arrived. And the focus, therefore, for us has always been actually, 1 year cycles of achieving the financial budget. And very, very little multi-year planning for fundraising. And what I think that does is it creates a culture that ends up in short-term fundraising. So you're going to default into fundraising events because it's about cash flow. It's about, we need to make the money in this 12-month cycle. So the focus is all about what's in front of you immediately. So what I did really was, working with the senior management team, working on the board to try and take the conversation into the bigger picture, try and look at what's the potential vision that we have here for fundraising, and that's partly an educational piece, and really start to drive the conversation beyond the current financial budget to actually what is our ambition in 5 years' time, what are some of those tangible financial ambitions that we could potentially have, and in 5 years' time, if we got to that, what impact could we be delivering for our community if we saw that fundraised income grow? So I guess on a practical level, what did that look like? It was about, when I joined, having the opportunity as a new strategic person in the organisation to do a kind of a situational analysis of our fundraising. So actually just going through all of our fundraising portfolio and identifying some of those strengths and weaknesses, and kind of highlighting where there were gaps, and kind of starting to shape the conversation about return on investment, and start to make that the conversation, and to start having conversations and educating the board about it's lifetime value of a supporter. It's not about how much money did we make from an event. It's about if we can have an individual who supports us over 5 years, over multi-years, what value do they have for us? How many events would that person attend? How many pills might they donate to? How many recurring gifts might they make to us? How many of those people might make a transformational gift into their will for us. So I guess, yeah, how to do that? It was about shifting the conversation at a board level to really look about lifetime value. How do we measure fundraising, really, I suppose? What is good performance of a fundraising team? And really make that as tangible as we possibly could. And again, we're sort of in a fortunate position around making the links with the football club around. There's a parallel. There's 30,000 fans, and you can start to say, well, it's not unrealistic for us to convert 1% of those or 10% of those. So you can start to map something that is ambitious but also credible and realistic, to say, if we converted 1% and got 300 people who are new supporters to us, that might be £25,000 extra money. If we got 10% of 30,000, we've got 3,000 supporters who might be giving us £250,000, and you can start to show the really big transformational jumps that you can make. So that's, I guess, that's hopefully gives a bit of flavour of the sorts of conversations we've been able to push and move, and I think then helps to set the culture that you can have in your fundraising teams around what is a priority.
I think that's very useful, because I think everybody in a charity, whether it's small or large, just starting out or even carrying on, has to make the case for investment sometimes. So hopefully everyone will find that quite a useful piece of insight. Let's go on to talking about the sort of key focus of today's session, which is about supporter recruitment. So we're going to take you through a process for getting the best out of supporter recruitment, as well as how we applied this to Albion and the community's work. So what I want to be able to show you is just to talk a bit about recruitment. And every charity needs to recruit new supporters, but they obviously cost money to recruit. And in recent years, the cost of recruiting new supporters has increased considerably, whilst the responses that you tend to get have reduced. And I think in this environment, it's crucial that charities make the most of the opportunities that they already have to recruit new supporters at low or almost no cost. And I think most charities have a number of touch points with the public, places where they engage individually with people who are interested in their work. This could include their website, the events you run, your offices or the premises, or a range of other different places. And some charities are particularly lucky with their touch points, like Albion in the community, because they have thousands of people that already come to them, already have a close association with their work. So football club charities, hospitals, which could include visitors and patients, and obviously other charities with services in the community. But yeah, most charities will have some touch points. And I think these places have two big advantages over other recruitment channels for two big reasons. One is that the people you encounter there are your target audience. You know they're interested in your work in some way. There could be beneficiaries, they could be involved in it, but whereas in paid recruitment, you don't know whether people are actually interested, and you're trying to sort of search for this needle in a haystack of people that might be interested. And then secondly, they're free. Actually getting hold of them is free. Yeah, you might have to pay for materials, but if you're a hospital charity, it doesn't cost much to actually have a group of people in a fundraising hub within the footfall place in the hospital to actually recruit new people. Whereas if you're doing press ads, it costs a lot of money to actually pay for the advertising space. So if you're investing in other forms of recruitment without optimizing your existing touch points first, then I think you're making a big mistake, and you're probably wasting your money, like a lot of charities are, even bigger charities. So today we're going to show you how you can make sure you're making the most of these existing touch points. You may, of course, want to deal with paid recruitment too, which is great, and you should do that. But do the touch points first, because those are the cheapest, and they're probably likely to be your best source of support. So we're going to take you through the basic process of a touch point review. And this is basically a case of standing back from your organization and building a simple list of the different interactions it has with the public. So for each of those, you need to estimate the number of people that comes into contact with the organization each year. And this will help you prioritize and optimize which ones you're going to prioritize and optimize first. Secondly, you need to evaluate what the charity is currently doing to recruit supporters from it. And then thirdly, think creatively about how you can use that touch point more effectively to recruit supporters and fundraisers. So step one, I would say, is simply doing an audit of your touch points, which in more simple terms is list them. Just do the list of them. So I can show you an example of that here. So I've done a sort of dummy example of what I would say is probably in here could be a sort of a medical charity that has a helpline. Let's call it that. So here we go. I hope you can see this okay on the screen. Mark, can you see that all right? Is that?
Yeah, it's coming up for me. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is just dummy data put in here, but hopefully it helps. So what this charity has got, and this is their touch point list. They've categorized it in local services, lots of different types of local services. You've got outreach services that they've got. They've got communications such as people at exhibitions and the website itself, social media, campaigns and policy, fundraising and volunteers. So those are their kind of what they've said is their overall sort of touch points. And then within it are the individual touch points. So for example, you've got, branch meetings. So you've got local meetings that happen for beneficiaries. And in that, over the course of the year, about 515 people look like they get engaged by that. And if you list it like this, you've got training days, campaigning, we've got the website, if you can see on row 25 there, with nearly 2.5 million people engaged. So that's obviously a significant touch point for them. You can see how there is real variation in the number of different people on each of those touch points. So I'm going to just scroll this up to looking at, so row 15 here, helpline inquiries responded to. So this charity has a helpline where it helps people. So you can see that there are differences not only in the number of people coming into the touch points, but also kind of in the quality of those touch points, in the sort of closeness that people feel to the organization when they encounter it on different touch points. So from this, the organization is then able to say, well, what are our priority touch points? It could be a mixture of the number of people coming through, but it could also be a mixture of how strongly they feel towards the charity and what sort of bonds they have. So that is the first step that you would take in building a touch point review, just listing those touch points and trying to prioritize them. The second thing that you then do is try to sort of understand and optimize each touch point. So, go through each of your priority touch points and try to understand how it works and how it could be used most effectively to recruit new supporters. So, for example, it's trying to make the most of how each touch point functions. For example, is there a chance to get somebody to make a direct ask to a potential donor, like at an event? If you do events as a charity, is there a point at which somebody introduces the event and says, right, on your marks, get set, go, or gets people at the end of the event and says, well done, everybody, now go home. By the way, sign up for our regular giving ask if you can, so and these in-person asks can be really, really effective. Alternatively, you may not have that sort of opportunity at a particular touch point. Maybe you'll just have to have a recruitment leaflet. So those are examples of how you can start to optimize some of those things and see if you can apply similar strategies to different touch points to make the process a bit simpler. I think a really important thing to think about when you're looking at each touch point is consider how people might be feeling when they encounter it and what might be the most effective way of asking for their support in that. And this can really differ across charities. If you're a medical charity, for example, a hospital, if somebody's coming into the hospital, they might be a patient, they might be a family member, they might be feeling worried, they might be feeling anxious. What is the best approach if you're going to talk to them about supporting the charity? What might be the best way to do that? So just as a couple of examples on this, for example, the website. Your website is likely to be one of the kind of key touch points for your charity because so many people will probably have contact with it over the year. And people are there for lots of different reasons. They could be seeking advice, they could be a beneficiary. So make sure though that there are really prominent donation asks on there and that it's easy to donate. You need to also, across your touch points, decide what you're going to be asking people for. There's no use in sort of making lots of different asks across those of your touch points. And as you'll see when we talk to Mark about Albion in the community, we decided with them to have one thing that we were asking for in the ask, which is their regular giving product. Just one thing. And I think keeping that consistency of asks makes it much simpler for people to know, right, this is the best way to give to the charity. So if you continue to keep asking that way, that really cements it in people's minds. Other things you can do on the website, not just the home page by making it obvious that you can donate, but why not go into individual pages such as the content or the advice that you're giving and have little boxes within that to say, well, if this advice has been useful to you, perhaps you might like to join us on a regular gift. There are lots of ways you can put that into that particular touch point. So that's just one example, and we'll explore some more with Mark in a minute. So that's what you do, and then you implement it. And I think the final thing I would say, just of this whistle-stop tour through touchpoint reviews, is that it's good to have a supported journey for each touchpoint as well. So when somebody comes in, what happens next? If they do sign up, what happens next? And you can have similar supported journeys for a number of your touchpoints to simplify it a bit, but really think about how that works. So I hope that's a sort of a useful starting point for thinking about touchpoint reviews. I think we can look at it more in practice now when we apply it to Albion in the community. So Mark, I wonder if, and this is a big question, but I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about how we and you applied this process to your work.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that is a big question. So we'll try and keep that as practical and as focused as I can. Feel free to jump in, Richard, and help guide me.
I wonder if a good starting point. I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. A good starting point might be, which touch points we looked at first. What sort of touch points were you prioritizing on your initial list?
Yeah, absolutely, and actually, I say probably the most important point from my perspective before that is actually that we did it together, and I think you absolutely can do touch point reviews on your own in your own organisation. I think one of the things which I found most beneficial, and the reason that we worked with you yourself, Richard, was actually having someone outside of the organisation to be that critical friend, that really objective person who could help us to scrutinise and analyse the contact points that we had, because I think we're so entrenched in what we do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's our fundraising activities or whether it's our delivery programs. Actually, that fresh pair of eyes that can come and support the process of doing touch point reviews, I think is really, really beneficial, because through this process, when we're working with you, Richard, I know the conversations we were having and the questions you were asking were, from your point of view, things which we were blindsided by, really. You don't see that blind spot that you're working in, and kind of you would ask us questions, we're going, oh yeah, it's a good point, I don't know why we've never done that.
Well, maybe they were just such stupid questions that you were blindsided. Like, what is he doing? Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's the value of stupid questions, the value of the obvious question that's in front of you that you've completely missed, and that's that unlocking of how you can just do this effectively and efficiently and for free, because actually the resource and the assets are there. You just maybe don't realize that you can potentially use it. But yeah, so what did we do in terms of prioritizing? Well, we kind of broke it down into doing 3 separate touch point reviews. So we had, first off, basically all of the contacts that we have as a charity. So as Albion community, who do we interact with on a kind of daily, weekly, regular basis? So whether that's digital and online, or through our delivery programs out in the community and events that we're running, every warm contact that we as a charity have. And then the second touch point review that we did was look at, actually there is data that the football club collects themselves, and they collect huge volumes of digital data, and obviously have huge touch points with fans around what the football club is doing. But a lot of that data is the club's data, and it's not data that we're using. There's a lot of people who sign up and subscribe for marketing information from the football club, but as an independent legal entity ourselves, we're kind of categorized as being a third party. Do you want to hear about the third-party organisations linked to the football club? So we don't have complete control over that data. So there's a whole interesting space around that we went through analysing. And then the third touch point review was then about what other touch points that the club have with fans that we could potentially utilise in the sort of the longer term. So as touch point reviews, they were kind of prioritised in order of what's the lowest hanging fruit. So start with our warm contacts, then the stuff which the club are collecting that we know that we can potentially make use of with a little bit of pushing, and then the longer term stuff that we might need to actually do more work and do more planning and more thinking about.
I think that's a really important point, and I think that last group is potentially one of the most exciting groups as well. So, and I'd say to everybody when they're doing touch point reviews, don't just look at the existing touch points that you have where people are already coming. Look at what the potential touch points could be if you were to push it, and if you were to negotiate with other organizations. Because I think one of the exciting things about Albion in the community is you've got this huge number of football supporters for Brighton and Hove Albion, but it's just how can you get access to them? And if so far as a charity you've not been, not you personally, but the cause hasn't been sort of particularly aggressive or assertive in saying, like, we want access to your email list, we want to be able to get people to opt in whenever there's a transaction in the club shop of somebody saying, yes, I'll give a regular gift to Albion in the community. If you haven't thought about it and been asking those questions, and those possibilities aren't even going to have occurred to you. So I think going through that process of actually saying, well, here are the possible ways we could do it, that also helps you to kind of go, well, here are the things, here's how we prioritize what we're going to ask of the football club. You know, what are the things we're going to ask the football club to allow us to have access to? And at least, you know, you can then ask, even if you can't ask for everything, you can ask for the 2 or 3 really big things that are going to make the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, I guess, starting back from what we had in our control and what we started to look at from our perspective was, you know, some things we've really spoken about in terms of the easy wins of our website and our emails and our kind of digital touch points, and yeah, they're really easy wins on, you know, just make it really clear in any of those communications that, you know, regular giving is the most important ask that you want, and that principle can then, you know, flow through everything else that you're doing, you know, whether it's our comms or the comms that we want to, you know, engage with third party in the football club. Actually, it's that hierarchy of the thing we want people to know about is the best way you can support us is through regular giving. And actually, what we've never had is that focus on what we wanted to ask. If we have one opportunity to ask, what's that one thing that we want to ask them to do for us? And I think getting that clarity and then spreading that, or thinking how do we apply that across all the touch points, was one of the key principles for us. But I think, you know, in terms of some, you know, tangible things that we looked at in our touch point as a charity, there was obviously your stuff with the website, there was stuff around how do we use email, but, you know, I think one of the things which kind of unlocked for us was thinking about some of our activities and some of the services which we deliver. And I think sometimes as fundraisers, we can be slightly nervous about where we go with that and how much we push it, and potentially how aggressive we want to be in that space around beneficiaries, or people who are connected with beneficiaries, people who are accessing services, or people who are already paying for activities, which is a lot of our case. We run a lot of football activities which people already pay for. But actually, it's a tremendously interesting contact point and touch point for us. So you know, one of the things we looked at in our touch point review was about those kind of football activities that we have, and actually there's such a rich process that you can kind of dive into around, well, you have to register for an activity, so there's a booking process actually.
So you basically, just to summarize, what you basically, Albion in the community runs soccer schools for kids. Yes. In term time and in holiday time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this is what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, yeah. So it's one of the programs we do is like, yeah, football programs, football camps for kids. Yeah, on a weekly and holiday basis on a fairly large scale. But it's it's an income generator for us. So we only ever view that as it's transactional. So actually you're booking and you're going to that session. But actually when you start to look at that and unlock the potential for fundraising there, you kind of go, well, they're going through a booking process through us. You know, we have their data there. Whenever they book, you know, how do we prompt them to find out more about becoming a regular supporter of the charity? You know, they're, as parents, as adults, they're bringing their child along, so there is face-to-face contact at the session. You know, where are the opportunities for us to prompt them about how they can support the charity in ways when they're physically present at the pick-up and drop-off points of those sessions and activities? And how do we train our staff to talk about our regular giving and individual giving programs? How do we, you know, what are the opportunities for giving out goodie bags for the kids to actually take into their home, so that there is, you know, promotional material or recruitment material that is in the family house, and of course, you know, email communications that come after your attendance at a session. So you've gone through a program, and we would regularly thank you for coming and remind you to book again. Well, actually, there's the opportunity for us to be building in the messaging around ways that you can support us as an organisation beyond just paying for that transactional product that you're consuming from us. So just as one small example of one little bit of our delivery activity, I think, Richard asking the stupid questions of us of, why are you not doing this? How much do your staff actually advocate on behalf of some of the fundraising activities? You're giving goodie bags out to the kids. Do you ever put anything in there about your fundraising activity? I think is just one example of actually so many quick wins that actually they don't cost us anything, but actually suddenly we've got another 5,000 people across the year who we are being really focused in saying, the thing that we really want you to do to help us as a charity is this, and this is the way that you go about supporting us.
And I think this is really good example of a touch point, because it shows just how it really pays to really understand the touch point itself. To go to the actual touch point and go, right, what is happening here when the parents turn up? Where do they go? Do they go to a table where there's somebody there registering the kids and bring them in? Do they come at the end? When is the right place to be asking? And to understand the full process, because there may be several points at which you can communicate with people. So like you say, Mark, there's the emails when booking, there's the emails at the end in following up, there's the actual day itself. When is the right time, and how can you create a little communication plan for each touch point that will maximize the value? And I think the other thing that comes from this, which is a good illustration, is you've got staff there, or even volunteers that are sort of registering the kids and the parents as they come in. Well, they're obviously not going to be that excited about having to give loads of bump out for Albion in the community or make loads of extra statements. So how do you consider their position and try and make the most of them as a potential advocate for you and as a potential call to action? So I think the conclusion we came to there was that the people sat on the registration desks, if you just gave them a sentence to say, have you thought about supporting Albion in the community or becoming a community champion on £5 a month? Just a sentence, and then handing out a leaflet with the joining stuff on it. That was the optimum thing at that point. And it was to be done at the end of the day, at the start, not at the start of the day when the parents drop the kids off, because then they're in a rush to get off to somewhere else. So again, it's like trying to think about every little detail of it, of how you can really optimize it to give yourself the best chance of people joining up. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the other interesting example of that sort of touch point is then also kind of fundraising events. So if as an organization you have fundraising events, often you're probably just using the event itself as the fundraising as the income generating place. But one of the things which we've started to look at with our fundraising events is actually those events are purely kind of recruitment opportunities for our regular giving, and actually flip it on its head and kind of think about what is a fundraising event for. So one example, very recently we did our annual fundraising quiz here at the stadium in November. 200 people come along to that, so it's a fairly large event for us. But actually, having gone through the touch point review with Richard, actually we thought about that event in a very different way. So we've got 200 people basically sitting in a room for 2 hours with us. Actually, they're a captive audience. They're there because they want to support the charity. Actually, we're not going to stop at the quiz. The quiz isn't where our ask of you finishes. So we're looking at having a place in the room, having branding in the room about our regular giving program. At the registration desk as they're coming into the event, we're kind of setting the tone about welcome, welcome to what you're coming to tonight. We'd like you to consider becoming a community champion. Here's a leaflet. Go and sit down whilst you're waiting for the event to start. And actually, you're starting to prompt and sow little seeds. But actually, the person who's hosting the event, you have everyone's attention. So actually, the host for the evening's fundraising event actually really pushes it throughout the whole of the activity, so you can't get away from it, and just building into the schedule a moment where you kind of get that direct response happening. So you show an emotionally impactful video about the work of the charity, or you have a beneficiary talking. and then you basically kind of get people to pledge support. You kind of basically get the host to say, right, okay, we want as many people tonight to sign up to become community champions to have more impact, and actually physically get people to put their hands in the air to say, yes, I'm committing to do that, and then create the space in the program to allow people to fill out the forms or to go to a place in the room where they can sign up. So I think kind of just thinking about the way you use fundraising events as well, which you probably have more creative freedom to do than you might do in kind of delivery touch points, community delivery touch points, is also something really, really interesting, and something which we tested a little bit of at our quiz night, but certainly as we move forward, we see that as a really important recruitment tool. And also, again, the follow-up, people who've been at an event, the email follow-ups that you can do, that you can send out to people around, thank you for coming. There are other ways that you can support the charity.
I think those are some really good examples, and I think just the other one I'd add to that is kind of going beyond your existing touch points that the charity has, and looking at, well, what are the touch points that the club has. You've got the second group where people who had opted in through club communications to hear from Albion in the community. What we were devising then for them is just some sort of process by which you as a charity can introduce yourselves to them on the first email and say, look, hello, just wanted to say hello, you opted into hearing from us, this is what we do, and just to really galvanize people and make them interested in the charity and remind them of why it matters. And then almost have a follow-up where you actually are then converting them into a regular giver, and having a series of communications that really try and push forward why you should become a regular giver. So that's just another really simple example of a touch point. I wonder if, Mark, we could just quickly move on to how you plan to roll this out, because I think this is a whole new thing about it, is that you go through all the planning phase. But for someone like you who have quite a few touch points to work on that all have quite a lot of potential, how does one go about actually sort of implementing that? It takes time, doesn't it? It's not something that you sort of do all at once. It has to almost be quite a sort of a phased rollout to make it doable, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I've thought about it is our strategy for regular giving is about it being a persistent drumbeat. So it's about being consistent and being something that's ongoing, something that's here to stay for the long term, not getting caught up in, we need to do a big launch, we need to do this big, fancy, sparkly, massive marketing campaign to make everybody know about this at the same time. Actually, we've deliberately and intentionally actually soft launched what we're doing, because we want to make sure there's momentum in the long term and we don't burn ourselves out. So it's about making sure it doesn't fizzle out, that there's a gradual build up, focusing on our warmest contacts first, and then we have scheduled it over a 3-year period across all of those touch points that we've done, to slowly exhaust our warm contacts, really embed it as a cultural thing that it's always there, it's always talked about, and then slowly start to move into those other touch points. We sort of launched it in November, so we are still in early days, although we could be in a long period of planning and scheduling for us. But it's about, for us, continuing to build the noise, and being absolutely focused on the kind of the hierarchy of our fundraising, which is the main thing that we want people to do to support the charity is to become a regular giver, and making sure that is just really embedded really well across everything that we do. So it is about scheduling, and it is about planning it, and like I say, we've got a really detailed 3-year schedule where we know when we want things to happen, launch, and then we can start to work back from those periods to kind of look at the practical things, like when do resources need to be developed, when do we need to write copy for various bits. So yeah, I think for us, how do we plan to roll it out? It's about starting with our warmest contacts. Where are those quick wins? Where's the lowest hanging fruit? But making sure we can sustain that, and not just go for expectation that it's going to be this massive big launch that is there for a month and then sort of disappears.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I hope that's useful for everybody in talking about the touchpoint reviews and how that worked at Albion in the community. I think I think we've got about 5 more minutes in this conversation before we get on to having a discussion in the group and questions and answers. I wonder if we could very quickly have a quick chat about the regular giving scheme that we came up with, because I think it is fundamental to the touchpoint reviews, is that they all focused on trying to get people to give regular gifts, and to do that we needed to develop a really strong regular giving scheme that would work. We can maybe talk about this in another session another time in more detail, but I wonder if we could perhaps try and cover this quite quickly about maybe what we were trying to achieve with that regular giving scheme, and obviously we can show people what we came up with in the end. But what were your thoughts on sort of what it really needed to do?
Yeah, so for the regular giving program itself, for us, we wanted something that was going to really create an identity. We didn't have an identity around our giving programs. So for us, that was really important. Now, a really strong brand identity, that people were able to join something. And partly because as a football fan of the club, there is a really strong identity around what you're doing. You are, a fan of the football club. You literally wear the colours of the football club. You buy into all the merchandise that there might be around the football club. And there are supporter clubs. There are a whole load of levels of membership that you might have being a fan in the football club. So we wanted something that created an identity for the charity, but was also distinctive, didn't confuse things with what the football club was offering. So very much it was a way of enhancing your support for the football club. So almost wanted to kind of challenge fans a little bit to kind of go, you're only a real fan of the football club if you're supporting it on and off the pitch. And actually off the pitch support is as important as on the pitch support. So creating something that was really exciting, something for people to be involved in, something that was kind of a little bit exclusive, but actually something you wanted to be proud of and tell other fans and encourage them to get involved in.
I think another really key thing about it from my point of view was that it was slightly unusual in a charity regular giving scheme, in that most charities will be appealing to people on the basis of need and of what the charity actually does. So to say, if you were doing that, you would just say, well, we're helping lives in the local community, we're helping these kids to achieve better lives and get better education, things like that. But the thing about football charity is that your target audience is already on side. Basically, they already know it does good stuff in the community. What the message that they need to know is about, well, this is part of you supporting the club. This is about you feeling proud of becoming part of this. This is what you do as a good supporter. So I think what we ended up with is that the actual message about what you could help to achieve was actually quite brief. It was like you could help Albion do great things in the local community, help kids and help underprivileged kids, that simple without going into loads of detail. What we were really focusing on is how that enhances your sense of pride in the team, how you feel part of something, so it's quite a different sort of ask from a very traditional charity regular giving scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, kind of also I think wanting it to play on that sense of team, sense of togetherness, and actually that we're all in this together. It's about you as fans coming together with the charity, with the football club, with the players, that we're all in this together, and the sense of kind of being a football fan, it's tribal. It's actually who's on the inside. Actually, we are together here, and I think that's almost quite an interesting principle to try and replicate in other charitable causes. Actually, there's a lot to learn from that space of football charities and that kind of dynamic of being a fan of a sporting entity, whether it's football, cricket, or rugby, or anything like that. Kind of that tribal nature of how do you create tribes around your charitable cause, and making sure that it's not just about we just want you to fund and bankroll us. Actually, we're all in this together. We're all playing our part. Our staff, our volunteers, our football players, our fans. We're here together to make an impact in our community.
And so, I don't suppose you have an example of what was produced there, what we produced in the end, do you?
Funny you should say that, Richard. Here's one that I made earlier. Yeah, I can see there's one in the background actually, just over your shoulder. But we have a little the pack that we created for regular giving was actually really quite simple. So we have this kind of A5 pack. So when you sign up, this is what you receive. And inside the pack, but one of the key things is about receiving a pin badge that you wear. Let me get that a bit closer. You can see that. So it's a really lovely pin badge that just simply sort of says, Albion community champions. Get that really closely. So it's a really nice, high quality pin badge that we're encouraging people to wear. Which is the notion of, as a football fan, you wear your club's colours. So actually, how can we get fans to wear the charity's colours in some way, shape, or form? And also, there's a bit of a culture in charities anyway around kind of charity pin badges and things like that. So you get your badge when you sign up, and we've kind of designed it in a way of, we want to reward loyalty. So actually we've designed different types of badges for different years. So in a year's time, you receive another badge. It's a slightly different colour. It's got bronze. And then at different points in the future, I think it was 3 years and 5 years, you kind of go silver and then you go gold. So they become collectible and become a talking point, hopefully. So you get a pin badge when you sign up, and then we've got to have a little postcard from our charitable patron, who is also former club captain of the football club. So a little postcard that he's signed to kind of say, I'm really happy that you've become a community champion. And so it's that sense of the players and the team being part of it. And then it's kind of just a simple welcome letter, sort of a 2-page welcome letter. They're just really explaining that you've become part of a really special community that's making a real difference to people's lives in the local area, and this kind of sets out a little bit of expectation as to what you might get from being part of this club. And then we put in a little survey, so with a response envelope, just to kind of try and get a little bit more of an understanding of the supporters. So again, really simple 2-page survey, just asking different bits of information around basically why were you interested in becoming a community champion? How did you hear about it? And the kind of usual questions you'd expect to try and understand the audience a little bit better. And then a couple of other bits that we have in here is a little leaflet which we'd produced, which again just really kind of lays out kind of stuff around what does the charity do, and really is more about the impact that you're going to have. Little case studies from some of our beneficiaries to really endorse the fact that these are the people that you're helping. And then finally, in the pack, we have this sort of what we call the recruitment card, really. So these are little perforated, you can see little perforated cards which you can rip off like this, and basically spread the word to your friends and families and other fans. So it kind of just says, become a community champion, and just has information on the back around website address to talk to your friends and other supporters to try and encourage them to spread the word and become our recruiters. So using the community champions themselves to go and can you tell 5 other people about being a community champion, and if those 5 people tell another 5 people, can we actually start to recruit more people within the community, again in a cheap, free, cost-effective way. So that's the pack that we have, and essentially that's the only money that we've spent on the scheme at the moment, and we haven't spent money on any advertising, any other marketing at the moment. It's just been the cost of creating those assets, which isn't that expensive, really.